Hello and welcome to Senior Solutions, where we bring you topics affecting seniors and their loved ones. I'm your host, Mindy Felinton. Some of you may know of someone or have even a child in your family who is a person with disability. And we wonder, how are we going to make sure that their life is the one that they want to lead and that there's money available for them? They have very different needs. Well, my guest today is Mark Friese, and he's here to talk with us about special needs trusts and investments and how that might differ and how people can plan, because as we know, people are living longer and longer. Persons with disabilities are living longer and longer. So Mark, I want to thank you very much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I'm very eager to learn more about this topic myself, because obviously this is something that's growing in leaps and bounds, the need for this particular type of planning. And you are the vice president at the Merrill Lynch group.
I am in Washington, D.C., and I help with their special needs program there. So we cover Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, although our practice is basically worldwide, so we have clients all over the place.
And you focus a lot in the area of dealing with families who have either children or adult children with special needs.
I do.
And tell us a little bit about what that looks like and how that's different from perhaps planning that you would do for families or individuals who don't have that need.
Right. Well, the big difference is that you're planning for 2 lifetimes. So you have to make sure the parents are okay, and you have to make sure the person with disabilities that perhaps still lives in the household is okay. In about 70% of the cases right now, people that have disabilities are still living at home. So you're worrying about the parents, making sure, are they going to be okay? Are they covered financially? And then when they're gone, which is the biggest worry for most people with special needs, what happens to my child or my adult child at that point when I'm gone, financially and physically, and who's going to take care of them and all the rest of the things we worry about.
And how did you get into this particular area of investment?
Yeah, almost everybody that's in the disabilities field is there for a specific reason. So my son is 17, he has autism, so he was diagnosed at about age 1.5. So almost everything that a family is going through, I've already been through. So I've seen it. I've lived it, and I saw it 17 years ago when there were not a lot of resources. So it's gotten a lot better. We still have a long way to go, but it's improved immensely.
And what are some of the resources that are available that people need to be aware of?
So there are a lot of free resources that are available, so there are a lot of organizations that would help. So ARC of Northern Virginia is an organization, and ARC is a national organization, so they would help. So within your state, you could take a look under the yellow pages and find ARC. Autism Society of Northern Virginia does a great job. I will caveat them on their board, so they do really wonderful work. And they're an advocate. So if you call them up and say, I have these particular issues with my child's getting ready to age out, meaning they're maybe 18 or 22 of school. Those are kind of transition times. What should I be thinking about? I always call it timelines. You know, what age should be doing what thing. So there's lots of things you should be doing, and talking to a professional about what the choices are is very important.
What are some of the things that people should be paying attention to?
I mean, the first thing is knowing that you need to be an advocate. So things aren't going to come automatically for you. Government benefits aren't going to come automatically for you. Resources available in the community are not going to come automatically for you. So you have to go out and find them. So groups like ARC and Autism Society of Northern Virginia are available to help. People like me, that I've been doing this now for 27 years, so I know a lot of resources. We call ourselves kind of the quarterback of the advocacy team. So I know where you can look, I know where to go, I can lead you in the right direction for it. So that's the first part. And I think knowing where your child is and then making sure you have all your ducks in a row as far as what you need to do at certain ages as they start to progress and get older.
And how can I make sure that my child does receive the benefits that they would be entitled to?
The first is knowing what they are. So you know at age 18 that you potentially could get Social Security benefits and know how to file for that. And know at the beginning if you have an IEP, an Individual Education Progress Report, that you've kind of followed up with that, and that's up to date and current.
Can you explain a little bit more about what that is?
So that's run by the school system, and so almost every child that has special needs is in the school system. Public school system is going to have that. It's a report. I'm not an expert on it at all. There are experts, so if you don't have that, I can put you in touch with somebody that knows that area really well. But it's basically a report for my son Christopher. Started when he was in kindergarten. They realized he had autism. They said, well, this is what the diagnosis is, these are the things he can do, and this is how the school system is going to help your child. And so they list out specifically, these are the goals for your child at kindergarten and first grade and second grade. So you have to have that in order to be able to apply for benefits, because the government needs to know that you have a child that really needs those benefits, that really is disabled.
Okay. So I interrupted you, and I apologize, but I tend to do that. And you were talking about some of the other things that people need to look at relative to the benefits that are available.
So the benefits are available there. They could look at public benefits, so that would be government benefits. They could look at private benefits, so there are companies like, or organizations like Autism Society in Northern Virginia. They have grants. They have a mini grant program. So if you apply for that, you could have some extra money coming in for things you've spent on your child. So those are some benefits there. There are also benefits you could have under your own Social Security program. So they're experts in that area. So there's lots of places to turn. There are waivers that you should get on a waiver program. Once again, I'm not an expert in that area, but I know where to turn for the client. So there are housing waivers that you could be on a list. Unfortunately now, like in the state of Virginia, it's about 1,000 people long, and they're going through about 70 or 80 a year, so it's going to take a long time probably before you get there. So what I tell families is, come see somebody early, because there's a lot of things you should be signing up for now and making sure you're on the list for now, because it may be 10 or 15 years before your child is actually eligible for them.
It's good information. And tell me a little bit more about how you work within the special needs trust structure. What does that look like for people who may be interested in learning what that is, a special needs trust is, and how that works?
So we would work in conjunction with an attorney that has a lot of expertise in that area, like you, because it is a specialty. So you'd have to really know what you're doing and draw the trust up in the right way. And we do very holistic planning, so we kind of look at the whole picture. So you're looking at not only the child with special needs or the person with disabilities in the family, but the whole family. So you may have a child in that family that doesn't have disabilities, and how you're going to treat them, and how you're going to run your legal documents for that. How you're going to make sure the child with special needs or adult with special needs is eligible for benefits. There are rules. There are rules as far as how much in assets they're allowed to have. Those rules are constantly changing. Right now it's about $2,000 a year, but in Virginia they just adjusted it. So now it's $1,000. So the child basically has to have no money at all in their name in order to be able to be eligible for these government benefits. And that requires educating the entire family. So not just the core family, but the outside people. Because almost every family with special needs, their family members outside want to help. And so they may put money in their will for them. They may make them a beneficiary for an IRA account or insurance policy. And if they do that and the child is then receiving government benefits at that point, it would then make them ineligible. So you have to do a lot of education. So there's a lot of work to do. And for a lot of families, it's overwhelming at the beginning. So I say one chunk at a time, depending on where you are in your life, and you should be okay, but there are certain things you need to do at certain times.
Sounds like a lot of moving parts.
It is a lot of moving parts.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you're doing your investments for persons with disabilities planning, how does that differ from the traditional planning you might do when you're helping people who don't have either a child or an adult child or a person with disabilities for whom they are also considering in their planning? Right.
So first of all, you should hire somebody that knows that field, because there are very specific rules. The income rule I just talked about, how much you're allowed to have in assets. And you're really planning for 2 generations. So for normal financial planning, husband and wife, you want to make sure they're okay, they have an education account set up for their child, then they're going to retire, you want to make sure they're okay for retirement. With a special needs case, the child may not ever be leaving the family, might be leaving the home. They said 70% of the people in disabilities right now are still living with their parents. So it's a very, very long time horizon. And so that requires significantly different planning, very specialized planning. It's
Would
not
that
your
be
normal.
more conservative planning?
It could.
As a kind of overall philosophy?
It definitely means more conservative planning, means the money needs to last a lot longer. It's a great question, because in the environment we have right now, it's really difficult. It's probably the most difficult environment we've ever had for special needs trusts, because the conservative side of your balance sheet, which are CDs and money market account and treasury bills and short-term bonds, aren't paying anything.
Yeah, they're just, it's ridiculous.
So the rate right now for a money market account is less than 1%. So what do you do in that case? How are you going to make sure that child's still going to be okay? How do you make sure the parents are still going to be okay? How do you make sure if the parents have a health issue that they're still okay? If they have a long-term care issue and one family member can't participate anymore? So there's a lot of moving parts, as you brought up. There's a lot of planning you need to do. It's very specialized. In our group, all of us have specialized training. So we've gone through Merrill's training program, so we know how the special needs world works. We know what we need to do for the financial planning part of it. And as I said, we have a lot of resources, so we're a real advocate. So pretty much anything in that area we know about, modification to a home that you might have to have, medical help you need to have, ABA therapy that you need to have. So we have a lot of resources to be able to help families.
And can you share with me some examples of families with whom you've worked, the different kind of scenarios and how you've been able to help them?
So a good example would be somebody that, the parents are aging out. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we get in there too late. So I get a call, oops, grandparents or, the parents are having problems right now. And
having health problems.
Health problems and health issues, and the child is, in their 50s and 60s, and what are they going to do? And there's no plan put in place. They don't have the proper assets set aside for the child. They don't have a special needs trust set aside. So we're now in a fire drill trying to make sure it's all okay. So that's a big issue. So I try to make sure my main number one mantra is start early, is get in front of somebody early that really knows what needs to be done, so you don't run into that situation, because we have lots of families where it has not been the case, and it turns ugly, and you have not enough money, and then you might have to use government benefits and Medicaid type benefits that might not be appropriate, and you might not be able to get into a housing situation that you want. There's a lot of things you can do ahead of time to make it a lot smoother.
What I'd like to do is kind of explore a little bit more with you what it looks like, what is ugly, how, probably people with whom you've worked, so we can talk about that a little bit more in detail when we come back from our break.
Okay.
That sounds like maybe a good starting place.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is, I think like I said, we'll start there when we come back.
Okay.
So we're going to take a short break right now, and we will be right back.
Oh!
Checking your fantasy league?
Nah, just my 401k statement.
Nice. Where'd you find the money for that?
I've just been saving a little every month.
I can't seem to save anything.
Well, what about all this? What about the money you're spending?
What money? It's gone before I can get my hands on it.
I got a pizza for a Todd.
Hey, can somebody spot me?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind.
It's 547.
Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
Hello, and welcome back to Senior Solutions, where we bring you topics affecting seniors and their loved ones. I'm your host, Mindy Felinton, and I'm joined today by Mark Friese, who's with the Merrill Lynch Group in D.C. and head of their special needs department in the D.C. area. And we were talking about special needs trusts and situations where you've worked with some of your clients, and you were about to tell us about one particular client with whom you've worked and how you were able to help them.
Sure. I mean, the case a lot of times with special needs is it's very expensive. So the average family spends an extra $30,000 to $60,000 a year. So there are a lot of cases in special needs where the family does not have a lot of money. And so we try to, as I said earlier, kind of educate the entire family. So in this one case, we reached out to the entire family. We had a family-style meeting where the grandparents were actually there who wanted to help. And so they set their estate up so that it would go into a special needs trust so that child was totally taken care of. Because the numbers are staggering. I mean, right now with low interest rates, in order to generate a $50,000 a year's worth of extra income for that child, you need about $1 million worth of assets. So if it's $200,000 or $300,000 need for that child, obviously you know what the math is. It's a lot of money. So there are a lot of ways to actually fund those trusts, but when that particular family, when we had the family members involved there and the grandparents involved, we were able to make sure they had enough money and they were totally taken care of and the child was taken care of. And that's such a great relief for parents because they probably have other children too they want to take care of, and so once they know that child's all financially sound, it's a nice relief for them. And they need their money too to be able to retire for themselves. So that was their case.
It's really a balancing act.
It is
what I'm hearing, to be able to balance the needs of the parent and potentially even grandparent, to balance the need of the person with disabilities, and then to balance the other children, if there are any, or other loved ones who they want to plan for and make sure there's something left at the end of the day. So you're really doing
Right.
quite the juggling act,
Right.
Mark.
It is a juggling act,
Yeah,
that's for sure.
yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
it. And you mentioned the Special Needs Trust. Will you share with us how you would define that, or what does that look like?
So the first thing you do, find out a lawyer that knows how to draw one up. And so we have a whole resources group that works with that. And I always describe a trust in a very non-legal manner, which is I don't trust what you're going to do with the assets. So I'm going to write some language in there to make sure everybody's going to be okay. So in a special needs trust, the assets are not actually owned by the child or the adult. They're owned by the trust privately, so they're eligible still to get government benefits. And that money is basically there, so they're going to be okay. So in a lot of families, it can be funded a number of different ways. So it could be funded as I told you with the story with the grandparents. They could change beneficiaries in their IRAs. They could change beneficiaries on their insurance policies. They could do all things like that would then fund that trust. Or in some cases, if you don't have money from outside, the family would need to do it. So I've done a number of talks on finding gold, because most families are like, where am I going to get the money? I'm spending all this money right now on my child. There's lots of gold. So
Tell us.
Here's for the gold.
Let's hear about the gold.
So it could be in your 401k. It could be in your insurance policy through work that you can adjust and increase. It could be you go out and buy additional insurance. There are very specific policies that are used in about 70% of special needs cases, trust cases and funding, where it's called a second to die policy. So both parents have to die first, and then it actually funds the trust. So it's a lot less expensive than a traditional whole life policy. So there's lots of ways to do it. Appreciated securities. There are also funding vehicles to do it. So lots of different
For example,
places.
what would those funding vehicles
So a funding vehicle could be you're going to eliminate one of the expenses. So you've now gotten on a waiver for housing, so the housing now is being covered by the state. So that's a funding vehicle. So now you don't have that particular liability.
Of course, that can always change depending on
it could change.
benefit changes.
It could change, and hopefully we're advocates and we're fighting for it. And housing is going to be a big issue. I mean, there's not enough housing for all the kids and adults that are coming through the system right now. I mean, autism is just one disability, and that's growing at somewhere between 12 to 15% per year. So it's a big, big problem. It's going to get worse. And so there's families getting together doing housing co-ops. So there's all kinds of innovative ideas. A housing co-op would be maybe 4 or 5 families get together and they buy a house specifically for their children, and they hire somebody to work in the house. And the house is set up with a builder, so it's specifically catered towards those special needs kids' needs, and then they live there. So there's going to be a lot of choices, and some of those can be also funded by government waivers.
There's a lot of opportunity for creativity, it sounds like.
There is.
Yeah.
There is.
So are there any other additional funding opportunities that you want to talk about?
If you can't afford drawing up your own special needs trust, there are what are called pool trusts. So they're run usually by the state. I'm on a board of one of the pool trusts in Washington, D.C. called Shared Horizons. They do a wonderful job. So that's another choice you have.
And how does that work?
So a pool trust actually puts all the money together for a number of different families, so they don't have to hire a lawyer to draw up the special needs trust. And then the assets are all commingled, and so there's lower costs to manage those assets. So that might be a good choice for somebody that doesn't want to have the assets managed individually, doesn't have a lot of specific needs, special needs for their child.
Is there a limit for the amount of assets that someone can put into a pool trust?
There isn't. I generally have my own opinion on it, because a lot of times if you have probably more than $250,000 to $500,000 in that range, you would probably want to have your own trust drawn up. You want to have special language in it. And there are some payback provisions within the trusts. They all vary by state. Once again, if you have questions, call me and I'll tell you which ones are, how they're all different, because they're all different.
Okay. Well, if we have time, maybe we can explore the differences between the D.C. metropolitan area jurisdictions.
Okay.
Does Maryland have payback? Does Virginia, et cetera? Well, do you want to just tell us that really quickly?
Some of them have they all have payback. So if you use the money and you're getting government benefits, there is a payback provision. So that payback has to come when that particular child or that adult dies. So that's calculated in it. And then the rest of the money that's left over could go back to the family, but not in all cases for pool trusts. So they're all different, and they'll have you sign what's called a joiner agreement. And in that agreement, it will spell it all out. And they're all different.
Each of the pool trusts are different.
They're all different.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. tell me about a letter of intent. What does that
So a letter of intent is kind of one of my
accomplish?
favorite documents. So it's not a legal document, but it goes together as I call it a codicil, even though it's not legally a codicil. But it goes along and tells the people that are going to be left behind what you want to do for your child. So what are some of the special things for that particular child? So, Johnny needs to have strawberry jam in order to take his medication. That's something that's important to know if you're trying to deal with a special needs child. Or these particular, equipment needs to be, fixed this following way. Or where are all the resources you have? I mean, you go along all day long with a child and doing all these things for him, and you assume that somebody else could just take that job over, which is not the case at all. Where are the legal documents for that child? Where would you call if you had a health emergency? Who are the specific doctors? What are the medications that child is taking? And it's actually a growing document. So you should write it down. We have an example of it. If you email me, I can show you an example of some. But it's a growing document. It changes as the child gets older. So it's a kind of a roadmap for the people that might take over. And for parents, it makes them feel a lot better knowing that somebody's going to have their child's best needs certainly in the front of their mind, and know kind of the rules or the guidelines where that child would be best for that child.
Kind of like a life care plan?
It is.
Okay.
That's a great description of it.
And it's similar to what, of course, a lot of older clients of mine are doing relative to their own needs,
Yep.
and wishes
Yep.
for how they want to be treated, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so that's important to have. Do you work with the clients to set that up?
We give them
The letter of
examples of
intent.
it. I encourage it highly. I do public speaking all over the country on this particular subject. So yes, we definitely encourage them to have some sort of letter of intent and some sort of game plan. So if something happens to them, what's going to happen next? What's the next world going to look like? And so just like you do with elder care planning, I call special needs planning, it's elder care planning, because you're planning for the parents and you're planning for that child to make sure everybody's going to be okay.
And what type of input do you generally get or give relative to siblings having to be the ones who are dealing with all of the issues when they have a person with disabilities as a sibling, for example?
Right. So all the cases are different. So it's like a puzzle for every family, and obviously a lot of cases where a child has special needs or maybe even an adult now and has a sibling, they may or may not want to really help. So it's like anything else in family planning. You have to look at that and see. If they want to help, that's great. There's lots of ways they can help. They obviously be involved within that letter of intent. They would know what their sibling wanted. And in the financial planning part's important too. So are you going to treat both children the same way? Which is a big issue. I remember when I grew up, my mom said everybody gets exactly the same amount of Christmas presents. Well, that's not really the case for the special needs child. You can't treat them different. You can't treat them the same because they're very different. And that child may need a lot more in assets. They may need a lot more protective financial control. There's certain rules for them that the other child may not have because they're going to grow up and get married and go on their own life and have a job and work and be employed. In the special needs world, about 60 to 80% of the kids are not employed in a job that can really support them, where they can support themselves.
And when you're helping people through setting up this special needs trust, or well, I guess it wouldn't occur in the pooled trust situation, but in the special needs trust situation, I know one of the things that's challenging are who's going to be the trustee and who's going to be a successor trustee, because one of the things that people need to think about, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be the succession of I have a child with disabilities who can live for many, many years, and who we're going to have in place to be able to handle the financial part of it.
Right.
What recommendations do you have for families when selecting a trustee and a successor trustee or a backup trustee?
Right. So it's kind of the same with regular planning. I mean, it's always hard to find a guardianship for your child if you need it. That could be a case with a special needs child. It could be the case with a child without special needs, that you're going to figure out who would take care of their assets because they're young, or they're not good with money, or they have health issues, or they have abuse issues. So those are really very common problems, and it's a very difficult problem for a lot of families. I sit down with a lot of lawyers when they say we need to make sure this trust is drawn up, and the parents are having a real difficult time figuring out who is going to be the trustee. Who's going to be in charge of the finances? A lot of times I recommend it's two different people. Somebody would handle the finances and somebody would handle the guardianship or the conservatorship for the account and stuff. So it really depends, but it's a very difficult decision. But we help them with it, and I say don't let that block you from doing the legal documents, because it's very important to have them all done. Wills, powers of attorney, medical care directives, and of course that special needs trust, so that child is going to be eligible for government benefits. And
how does a guardianship, you mentioned that, how does that play into the special needs world?
It's a very controversial subject right now. So a full guardianship would take away all of the child's or the adult's rights at age 18. So whether you need that or not is a very personal decision. So I talked to him about the outline of it. I have him go see the attorney to help work with that. But it's a controversial subject because, as I can tell you with my son, you always want to make sure your kid's going to be okay, and you have this vision down the road that they're going to get better, and they may. My child's autistic. He's fairly high functioning, so he might be able to do some things on his own down the road. So guardianship is a slippery slope, and you want to be really careful with it.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's lots of slippery slopes.
There are a lot of slippery slopes. Yeah. There's a lot of pieces, and I laugh because in autism, as an example, it's a puzzle piece. That's the symbol for it, and that's the case with all special needs families. It's a puzzle, so you're kind of figuring out, spending a lot of time with them. Usually, we have a meeting with a client. It's a 2 or 3 hour meeting to figure out where you're starting from.
And how frequently do you recommend that people schedule their meetings with you?
It depends, once again, on the family situation. We do a lot of family-style meetings. So the first time I might just meet with the parents and talk to them about their child. I like to meet the child, too, if possible. That always helps. And then we'll have a meeting with maybe the whole entire family. So siblings and grandparents and everybody else, so they kind of know what the rules are, because we want to make sure that everything is followed the right way and that the special needs child is well taken care of.
Okay, great. And if someone wanted to contact you or get more information about special needs planning and the investment component of it particularly,
right?
Obviously that's your area of expertise. How would they get in touch with you?
So they could call me. My number is 202-659-6138. They could Google me, because I'm all over, so it's Mark Friese. You'll find me in Google. Or they could email me, which is mark_Friese@ml.com.
Wonderful.
So those are all ways to get in contact with us.
Well, it was really helpful to get a better understanding of what distinguishes your services from other people who are doing what you do and in the special needs arena. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
And if you have an idea or a topic you would like to see covered on Senior Solutions, please feel free to email me at seniorsolutionsTV@gmail.com. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.